The mockery. The Grand Assembly Hall of the United Earth Defense Force fell silent as Captain Ilara Chen strode toward the center podium. Her uniform, perfectly pressed despite her 36-hour engineering marathon, contrasted sharply with the dark circles under her eyes. Behind her, a holographic projection rotated slowly, displaying what appeared to be the strangest warship design the Defense Council had ever seen. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, squinting at the bizarre configuration of the vessel. Its hull curved in unusual places, with asymmetrical protrusions and recesses that seemed to follow no logical pattern. The propulsion system looked woefully undersized, and the weapons placements were virtually non-existent. "Captain Chen," he began, his voice carrying that particular tone senior officers reserve for those they believe have lost their minds. "You've spent 4 years and 17 billion credits on this." Ilara straightened her shoulders. "Yes, Admiral. The UEF's Spectre represents a completely new paradigm in space warfare." A ripple of whispers passed through the assembly. Commander Orlov, the UEDF's most decorated tactical officer, made no effort to hide his smirk. "With all due respect, Captain," Orlov interjected, "this looks like something my 7-year-old might design. Where are the point defense arrays? The missile batteries? The mass drivers?" He gestured toward the hologram. "This isn't a warship, it's a flying coffin." Laughter erupted across the chamber. Ilara's jaw tightened, but her expression remained composed. "The Spectre doesn't need conventional armaments, Commander. Its design implements quantum phase technology that—" "Quantum phase technology?" Admiral Harrison interrupted. "You mean the theoretical concept that's never been successfully demonstrated outside a laboratory? The same concept that 3 separate research teams have declared fundamentally impractical for ship-scale applications?" Ilara nodded. "My team has solved the energy containment problems that plagued previous attempts. The Spectre can partially phase between dimensional states, allowing it to—" "Captain Chen." The Admiral cut her off again. "We're facing real threats with real consequences. The Defense Force cannot afford to divert more resources to speculative technologies, or our colonies are under attack." From the back of the chamber, General Nakamura cleared his throat. "The Voidborn incursions have increased by 73% in the past quarter. They've hit Proxima Centauri's mining operations twice this month alone. We need battleships, not science experiments." The hologram behind Ilara shifted to display the Spectre's internal systems. "If you would permit me to demonstrate." "That's enough, Captain," Admiral Harrison declared, standing up. "The Council has reviewed your proposals and technical documents. While your theoretical work is interesting, we're reassigning the Spectre project's remaining budget to conventional fleet expansion." He looked down at his tablet. "The Spectre will remain docked at Ganymede Station as a research vessel, with a skeleton crew for maintenance only." Ilara felt her heart sink. 5 years of work, countless sleepless nights, all reduced to a footnote in a budget reallocation document. "Admiral, the Voidborn technology operates on principles that conventional weapons cannot effectively counter. Their phase-shifting capabilities allow them to." "Thank you, Captain. That will be all." The Admiral's tone made it clear there would be no further discussion. As Ilara gathered her presentation materials, she caught sympathetic glances from a few junior officers. Most, however, were already engaged in conversations about the upcoming deployment of the new Zeus-class battleships. Massive, conventional warships bristling with weaponry that would prove utterly useless against the Voidborn's advanced technology. Outside the chamber, Lieutenant Maya Okafor waited, her dark eyes watching Ilara's face carefully. As Ilara's chief engineer and oldest friend, Maya could read the outcome without a word being spoken. "They didn't even let me finish," Ilara muttered as they walked toward the transit shuttle. Maya matched her stride. "Their loss. But you know what? History is filled with visionaries whose ideas were rejected until they became absolutely necessary. We don't have time for history to vindicate us," Ilara replied, her voice low and intense. "The Voidborn aren't just raiders. This is a reconnaissance force for something bigger. So what now, Captain? Ilara stopped, looking out through the station's massive viewport at Earth glowing blue and white below. We continue. Skeleton crew or not, we finish the calibrations on the phase drive. We run the simulations. We prepare the Spectre for combat, regardless of what the Defense Council thinks. Maya smiled. I'll inform the others. The others were the core team that had been with Ilara from the beginning. 12 brilliant misfits who believed in the Spectre as much as she did. Scientists and officers who had staked their careers on a ship that the entire Defense Force now mockingly called Chen's Folly. 2 days later, the Spectre departed for Ganymede Station. From the observation deck, Ilara watched as dock workers pointed and snickered at her ship's unusual profile. The Spectre didn't gleam like other military vessels. Its hull absorbed light in strange ways, making it seem to shift and waver even when stationary. "Let them laugh," Lieutenant Commander Rajpetal said, joining her at the viewport. As the Spectre's tactical officer, he had endured his share of ridicule from former classmates now serving on real warships. "They haven't seen what we've seen in the simulations." Ilara nodded. The simulations that showed the Spectre running circles around conventional forces. The simulations that demonstrated how its phase technology could counter the Voidborn's greatest advantages. The simulations that the Defense Council had dismissed as overly optimistic. "Ganymede Station in 30 minutes, Captain," came Maya's voice over the comm. "Engine performance exceeding expectations. We're running 15% more efficiently than projected." That brought a small smile to Ilara's face. Even now, the Spectre was proving its critics wrong, one system at a time. The relative quiet of Ganymede Station lasted precisely 23 days. Ilara was reviewing phase calibration data when the emergency alert sounded throughout the station. She rushed to the command center, arriving just as the station commander was bringing up tactical displays. "The Voidborn have hit New Washington Colony," he announced grimly to the gathered officers. "Full invasion force, at least 50 ships, including 3 command vessels." The room fell silent. New Washington was humanity's largest extrasolar colony, home to over 5 million people. "The 7th Fleet was in orbit," someone said. "They have 14 Zeus-class battleships." The commander shook his head. "Initial reports indicate the 7th Fleet has been neutralized. 18 minutes from first contact. 18 minutes. 14 state-of-the-art battleships destroyed in less time than it took to eat lunch." "They've adapted," Ilara said quietly, though in the stunned silence, everyone heard her. "They've found a way to phase shift their entire attack force simultaneously. Conventional weapons can't target what isn't fully in our dimension." Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the main communications screen. He looked years older than he had at the council meeting. "All available ships are being mobilized for defense of the Sol system," he announced. "The Voidborn fleet has changed course after destroying New Washington. Intelligence suggests they're heading directly for Earth." Ilara stepped forward. "Admiral, the Spectre is ready for deployment. We've completed all essential systems testing." There was a long pause as Harrison's gaze fixed on her. Pride warred with desperation on his face. "Captain Chen, I don't have the luxury of refusing any ship capable of combat right now," he finally said. "But I need to be clear, the Spectre will be part of the secondary defense line. I cannot risk our primary defense on an untested vessel." "Understood, Admiral. We'll depart immediately." As the communication ended, Ilara turned to find her core crew already assembled behind her. There was no need for a grand speech. They had all been waiting for this moment. "Maya, bring the phase drive to full operational status," she ordered. "Raj, run combat simulations based on the New Washington data. Dr. Levine, I want medical ready for potential phase transition effects on the crew." She paused, looking at each determined face. The Spectre was built for this exact scenario. Whatever anyone thinks of our ship, today we prove what it can do. Within the hour, the Spectre detached from Ganymede Station. As they cleared Jupiter's gravity well, Ilara gave the order that sent power surging through the ship's unique systems. Initial phase shift in 3, 2, 1. The universe seemed to hiccup. For a disorienting moment, the crew saw ghostly overlays of themselves performing actions they hadn't yet taken. Light bent around solid objects. Sound arrived before its sources. Then everything stabilized into a new state of being. The Spectre hadn't merely accelerated, it had partially shifted outside normal spacetime, allowing it to traverse distances in ways impossible for conventional vessels. Phase shift successful, Maya reported, her voice containing equal measures of professional calm and exhilaration. All systems nominal. Estimated arrival at Earth defense perimeter in 43 minutes. Ilara settled into her command chair, her gaze fixed on the view screen showing their destination, a distant blue marble where humanity had begun, now threatened by a force that didn't understand the species it had provoked. "They laughed at our ship," she said softly. "After today, no one will laugh again." The Vindication. The UEFS Spectre emerged from its phase transit at the edge of Earth's defense perimeter. The view screen showed a scene of chaos and destruction. The first wave of void-borne ships had already engaged the primary defense line, and humanity's mighty fleet was failing. The Zeus-class battleships, pride of the United Earth Defense Force, fired their massive rail guns and energy weapons at targets that flickered in and out of normal space. Most shots passed harmlessly through suddenly empty regions where void-borne ships had been milliseconds earlier. "Tactical analysis," Ilara ordered, her voice steady despite the horror unfolding before them. Lieutenant Commander Raj Patel's fingers flew across his console. 38 void-borne vessels detected, including their flagship. That massive structure at coordinates 227 Mark 43. Our fleet has already lost 7 capital ships. The remaining vessels are attempting to maintain formation, but their targeting systems can't compensate for the void-borne phase shifting. From the engineering station, Maya looked up. "Captain, I'm detecting dimensional fluctuations consistent with our simulations. The void-borne are using 5th-dimensional phasing to evade weapons lock." Ilara nodded. "Exactly as we predicted." She opened a channel to Earth Defense Command. "Admiral Harrison, this is Captain Chen of the Spectre. We are in position and request permission to engage using our specialized capabilities." The Admiral's face appeared on screen, illuminated by flashing red alert signals. Behind him, officers rushed between stations in the chaos of a losing battle. "Captain Chen," his voice carried a mixture of desperation and lingering doubt. "The situation is critical. The void-borne flagship is positioning to deploy some kind of large-scale weapon. Our conventional forces can't get close enough to disrupt it. That's why we're here, Admiral." Ilara's calm confidence was infectious. Her crew straightened in their stations. The Spectre was designed specifically to counter phase technology. "Request permission to move to the front line and engage directly." A brief hesitation. Then, "Permission granted. God help us all." Ilara turned to her crew. "This is what we built the Spectre for. This is what you all believed in when everyone else laughed." She tapped her console. "Battle stations. Prepare for combat phase configuration." Throughout the ship, systems that had remained dormant during testing came fully online. The Spectre's hull began to shift, sections folding and unfolding in geometries that shouldn't have been possible in 3-dimensional space. Inside, corridors seemed to elongate while simultaneously shortening. Crew members felt momentary disorientation as their perceptions adjusted to the ship's transformation. "Phase drive at full capacity," reported Maya. "Dimensional anchors deployed and stable. Weapons systems online," added Raj. "Phase targeting active and locked on the void-borne flagship." Ilara took a deep breath. "Initiate combat phase jump. Take us directly between the flagship and Earth." The Spectre vanished from its position, not with the flash of conventional engines or the distortion of warp fields, but with a subtle ripple in reality itself. An instant later, it reappeared between Earth and the massive void-borne flagship. On the UEDF command ship, Admiral Harrison stared in disbelief. What in God's name just happened? Where did the Spectre go? His tactical officer pointed at the display. Sir, it's between us and the Voidborn flagship. But that's impossible. It would have had to pass through our entire fleet formation. It didn't pass through, Harrison murmured. It went around. Somehow. Aboard the Spectre, Ilara gave her next order. Activate full dimensional interface. Show them what this flying coffin can really do. The Spectre began to change again, but this time more dramatically. To outside observers, it appeared to multiply, ghostly copies of the ship overlapping and separating, existing simultaneously in slightly different positions. The Voidborn flagship immediately directed its attention to this new threat, firing weapons that distorted space itself. They're targeting us with fifth-dimensional disruptors, Raj reported tensely. Conventional ships would be torn apart at the quantum level. But we're not conventional, Ilara replied. Execute counterphase protocol. As the Voidborn weapons fire reached the Spectre, something remarkable happened. Instead of damaging the ship, the energy was absorbed into the fluctuating dimensional boundaries the Spectre generated. The ship's unique design, those strange protrusions and recesses that had been mocked in the Defense Council, now revealed their purpose. Each served as a dimensional anchor point, allowing the Spectre to exist partially in 11 different dimensions simultaneously. Energy absorption at 87% and rising. Maya called out, excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. The phase inverse capacitors are charging exactly as designed. The Voidborn flagship increased its attack, pouring more devastating energy toward the Spectre. But with each blast, the human vessel's counterphase systems grew stronger. Capacitors at maximum charge, Maya announced, ready to redirect. Ilara leaned forward in her command chair. Target the flagship's dimensional drive core. Fire. The Spectre didn't launch missiles or fire energy beams. Instead, it released a carefully modulated pulse that propagated through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The pulse reached the Voidborn flagship not through normal space, but through the very dimensional planes the alien vessel was using to phase shift. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Voidborn. Their flagship's phase drive destabilized, forcing the massive vessel fully into normal space. Suddenly solid and vulnerable, it hung in space, its defenses momentarily disabled. All UEDF vessels, Ilara broadcast. The flagship is locked in normal space. Conventional weapons will be effective for the next 47 seconds. Fire everything you have. The human fleet responded instantly. Rail guns, missiles, and energy weapons converged on the Voidborn flagship from all directions. Without its phase-shifting capability, the alien vessel could not evade the barrage. Explosions blossomed across its surface, tearing into critical systems. But the Spectre wasn't finished. As the flagship burned, Ilara directed her ship toward the remaining Voidborn fleet. Multiple targets, she ordered. Wide dispersal phase lock. The Spectre released another pulse, this one spreading to encompass a dozen Voidborn warships. Like their flagship, these vessels suddenly found themselves trapped in normal space, their dimensional technology neutralized. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Human forces that had been on the verge of annihilation now pressed their advantage against enemies suddenly stripped of their greatest defense. Ship after ship in the Voidborn fleet was disabled or destroyed. On the command deck of the UEDF flagship, officers watched in stunned silence as the supposedly unstoppable invasion force disintegrated before their eyes. At the center of it all was the Spectre, the strange, mocked vessel that moved like nothing they had ever seen, appearing in multiple places almost simultaneously, neutralizing Voidborn ships with weaponry that seemed to bend reality itself. "That's impossible," whispered Commander Orlov, the tactical officer who had laughed the loudest at Ilara's design. "How is it doing that?" Admiral Harrison didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the battle displays, watching as Chen's folly systematically dismantled the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. 3 hours later, it was over. The remaining Voidborn vessels, Those that could still maneuver had retreated beyond the solar system. The invasion that should have been the end of human civilization had been repelled. The Spectre returned to its normal configuration as it docked with the UEDF command ship. Captain Ilara Chen and her core crew were escorted to the main briefing room, where Admiral Harrison and the surviving members of the Defense Council waited. The room fell silent as Ilara entered. These were the same people who had mocked her ship, who had called her research a waste of resources, who had relegated the Spectre to an afterthought. Admiral Harrison stood. For a moment, he simply looked at Ilara, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly and deliberately, he saluted. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room, "on behalf of the United Earth Defense Force and all of humanity, I extend our profound gratitude and apology." Ilara returned the salute crisply. "No apology necessary, Admiral. The Spectre performed exactly as designed." "Indeed it did," Harrison agreed. "And now I must ask, can we build more?" A small smile crossed Ilara's face. "My team has already prepared construction specifications for a full fleet. With proper resources, we can have 5 more vessels operational within 8 months. From the back of the room, a voice called out, "What will you call them, this new class of ship?" Ilara looked around at her crew, the brilliant, dedicated people who had believed when no one else would, who had endured the mockery alongside her, who had just helped save humanity. "The Phoenix class," she answered, "because sometimes the most powerful ideas rise from the ashes of rejection." As the briefing continued, Ilara's thoughts drifted to the Spectre waiting in dock. The strange, beautiful ship that defied conventional understanding. The vessel they had laughed at, until it erased an entire fleet. "They're already calling you the savior of Earth," Maya whispered beside her. Ilara shook her head slightly. "Not me," she corrected. "Us. All of us who saw possibilities where others saw only impossibilities." Outside the viewports of the command ship, Earth continued its serene rotation, its billions of inhabitants largely unaware how close they had come to extinction, or that they had been saved by a ship that should never have worked, commanded by a captain who had refused to accept conventional limitations. Sometimes, being laughed at was just the price of being right too soon.